There are secrets we bury so deep, we almost forget they exist. They lie dormant beneath the veneer of everyday life, in quiet suburban homes, behind smiles and family dinners. But what happens when that ground is disturbed? What happens when the people who love you most, the ones who raised you, stumble upon the monster you've hidden away? Welcome back to Horror Stories Hub. Tonight, we are not traveling to a haunted house or a cursed forest. We are going somewhere far more terrifying. A suburban living room in Ohio. And we will not just listen to a story. We will live inside the mind of a son on the very night his double life came crashing down. You won't just be listening. You will be.
The smell of bleach has never really bothered me. Honestly, it has a purity to it, a finality. It's the smell of a fresh start, of a slate wiped clean. But tonight, as I stood at the threshold of the living room, that familiar chemical scent made my throat tighten. It wasn't because it was overwhelming. My mother was always a meticulous cleaner. It was because of where it was coming from. It wasn't rising from the freshly mopped kitchen floor or the scrubbed clean bathroom. It was coming from my father's hands. He was sitting in his favorite leather armchair, but his back was ramrod straight, stiff as a statue. My mother stood by the window, her back to me, her shoulders trembling. Between them, on the oak coffee table, was a box. The old shoebox I had hidden so carefully beneath the floorboards in my closet. And next to it, spilled onto the cream-colored Persian rug, was my collection. A driver's license from Florida, a silver teardrop-shaped earring, a faded ticket stub for Pulp Fiction, and the knife. The small folding knife with the wolf engraving that I had cleaned so carefully with bleach. My father looked up. His eyes, the same eyes I had inherited, now looked at me as if I were a total stranger. And he asked just one question, his voice raspy. "Why, Alex? For God's sake, why?" You have to understand, mine was a model Midwestern family. My father, David, was an accountant. My mother, Susan, was a retired nurse. Our house had a white picket fence, a meticulously manicured lawn, and an old maple tree that cast a long shadow on the porch every afternoon. Picture perfect. I'm Alex, 24, a freelance graphic designer. That meant I spent most of my time working from home, in my room upstairs. It was convenient. I could look after my parents as they got older, and they never felt lonely. My mother would often bring me freshly baked cookies, and my father would occasionally pop in just to tell a bad joke he'd read in the paper. Our life had a rhythm. It was predictable, safe. Breakfast at 7 a.m., dinner at 6 p.m., church on Sundays, movie night on Tuesdays. I loved that rhythm. I loved the control it gave me. Everything in its right place. My parents, the house, my work. They were all perfect pieces in the portrait of a life I had carefully curated. They thought I was a quiet, slightly nerdy son, someone who lived in his own world. They were right. They just had no idea what that world actually looked like. To them, my sudden business trips were to meet clients. The nights I came home late were because I needed creative space. At some coffee shop they believed me. Why wouldn't they? I was their perfect son. I never caused trouble, always got good grades, always said please and thank you. I was a reflection of their successful parenting. At least, that's what I needed them to believe. Their peace of mind was a crucial part of my life structure. Their innocence was the strongest wall protecting my secret. And I did everything to keep that wall free of cracks. The first crack appeared about 3 weeks ago. It was small, almost unnoticeable to a normal person, but I am not a normal person. I notice everything. It was a Saturday morning. I had just returned from a client meeting in Pennsylvania. As usual, I parked my car down the street and walked home at 4 a.m., disposing of the muddy shoes and clothes in a separate trash bag in the garage. Everything was procedural. But when I walked into the kitchen, I found my mother sitting there in the dark. Only the faint light from the street lamp filtered in through the window. She hadn't turned on the lights. She just sat there, staring into a cold cup of tea. "Mom, you startled me," I said, keeping my voice level. She jumped. "Oh, Alex, I didn't hear you come in." She stood up, her hand trembling slightly, and flipped on the light. The sudden brightness made me squint. "How was your trip?" "Good," I replied. "The client was very happy." She nodded, but she didn't meet my eyes. She went to the sink, poured out the tea. "I just couldn't sleep." That was a lie. I knew it. My mother slept like a log, and she never sat in the dark. She was afraid of the dark. It was strange. An anomaly in a perfect equation. I filed it away, stored it in a corner of my mind, and began to watch. Over the next few days, more small signs began to appear. My father, who usually told me everything about his work, grew quiet at dinner. He would ask odd questions. "Did you see the news about that girl who went missing in the next county, Alex?" "Terrible," I would shrug. "I don't watch the news much, Dad. It's all so negative." And I would watch him. The way he set his fork down. The way he glanced at my mother. They were exchanging some silent message. A message I wasn't privy to. My suspicion peaked last week. I was in my room, finishing a project, when I heard a noise from my closet. A very faint creak. I had locked my bedroom door. No one could get in. But I had a tiny camera installed, disguised as a screw on the door hinge, just in case. I pulled up the footage on my phone, and I saw my mother. She had used a hairpin to pick the lock. She crept in, went straight to the closet. She knelt down, using her fingernail to pry at a floorboard she should have had no way of knowing was loose. She didn't find the box. I had moved it the week before, after noticing her change in behavior. But that moment, the moment I saw my mother, the gentle woman who loved me unconditionally, violating my most private space with a look of fear and determination, I knew they knew something, or they suspected. The false calm was over. The play was nearing its finale, and I needed to be the one to write the ending. When you realize you're being hunted in your own home, you have two choices: panic or become the hunter. I chose the latter. The game had changed. It was no longer about hiding. It was now a psychological war. A silent chess match played across the dinner table, in the hallways, through loaded glances and half-finished sentences. And I am a grandmaster. I started leaving false clues. A single muddy glove in the laundry basket. A news article about a cold case left open on my computer browser. I wanted to see how they would react. I wanted to measure their fear. My mother grew more and more withdrawn. She lost weight, had dark circles under her eyes. She would drop things, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't hold a soup bowl steady. She avoided being alone with me. If I came into the kitchen, she would find an excuse to go into the garden. My father tried to act normal, but it was a pathetic attempt. He'd talk about the weather, about sports, but his voice was hollow. He started locking their bedroom door at night. I could hear the bolt slide shut. It was laughable, as if a thin wooden door could stop me, if I really wanted to get in. Have you ever felt like a wolf, living among two sheep? It's a feeling of both pity and contempt. The escalation came not from me, but from them. One afternoon, I came home earlier than expected, and saw a strange man leaving our house. He wore a cheap suit and scuffed shoes. He had the look of a private investigator. I walked inside. My parents were sitting in the living room. They looked like they'd just seen a ghost. "Who was that?" I asked, placing my keys on the table. "Just a salesman, son," my father stammered. I looked him dead in the eye. A salesman. He wasn't carrying any products, and his car had dual radio antennas. Looked more like an unmarked police car. Silence filled the room. My mother began to sob quietly. My father just hung his head, running his hands through his hair. They had made a fatal mistake. They had sought outside help. They had tried to break the rules of my game. That meant I had to accelerate the timeline. I couldn't have some amateur ruin the masterpiece I'd spent years building. That night, I retrieved the box from its new hiding place inside an old speaker in the basement. I put it back in its original spot, under the loose floorboard in my closet. The trap was set. I just had to wait for them to spring it. And I knew they wouldn't be able to resist. Dinner that night was a pantomime. No one said a word. Just the clinking of silverware against porcelain. 1, 2, 3 cuts into my steak. I could feel the tension. It was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I was the one who broke the silence. "Did you find what you were looking for, Mom?" I asked, my voice soft. The fork dropped from my mother's hand, clattering loudly on her plate. My father froze, his grip on his own knife so tight his knuckles turned white. I don't know what you're talking about," my mother whispered, not daring to look at me. "Oh, I think you do," I said, setting my own utensils down neatly. "My closet, the third floorboard from the left." "You were so close." My father slammed his fist on the table, a single blow that made all the plates jump. "Enough," he roared, his voice breaking with pain and rage. "We need to talk, right now." And that's when it began. They led me to the living room. The box was there, on the coffee table, its contents spilled out. My mother pointed to the driver's license. "This girl, Sarah. She was my friend's daughter. She disappeared last year." "Alex, what? What did you do?" she sobbed. I looked at her. I really looked at her, for probably the first time in years. I saw a broken woman, and I felt nothing. No remorse, no guilt, just a mild annoyance at the mess. "I helped her," I said calmly. "She was lost. She was afraid. I gave her a destination." "A destination," my father screamed, lunging toward me. "You call that a destination? The police found her under a bridge. What have you done to my son?" The question was so absurd. He was looking at his son. I had always been here. "I am not a monster," I said, my voice perfectly even. "I am a problem solver. The world is full of loose ends, people with no purpose, people who are just adrift. They create chaos. I bring order. I bring a conclusion." I picked up the folding knife from the rug, admired the wolf engraving. "Every item in this box," I continued, "is a story I finished, an equation I solved. It's not about hate. It's art. It's control. You could never understand. Your minds are too simple." My mother collapsed onto the floor, her cries now sounding like the wail of a wounded animal. My father backed away, the anger on his face now replaced by a raw, primal fear of his own flesh and blood. They finally saw the real me. Not Alex, the good son, but Alex, the artist, the architect. After the storm, there is always a calm. But this was not a peaceful calm. This was the silence of surrender. They didn't call the police. Of course they didn't. I knew they wouldn't. A parent's love is a strange thing. It's blind. It's illogical. And most importantly, it's a weakness I could exploit. We sat in the living room that night until the sun came up. No one spoke. My mother had cried herself empty. My father looked like he had aged a decade. I, for my part, cleaned up my collection, carefully placing each item back in the box. When the first rays of sunlight entered the room, I spoke. "Now, we have a new understanding," I said, my voice clear. "Families protect each other. My secret is now our secret." I looked at my father. No more private investigators. No more anonymous calls to the police. "Do you understand?" He nodded, a weak, lifeless gesture. I looked at my mother. "You will continue to bake cookies. I will continue to be your son. We will continue to have dinner at 6 p.m. Nothing will change." But of course, everything had changed. I had broken them, but I had also rebuilt them in the image I required. They were no longer my parents. They were my keepers. my unwilling accomplices. The roles had been reversed. The child was now the one in control. This house was no longer their home. It had become their prison, and I was the warden. Everything was back in its proper place, even more perfect than before, because now there were no more lies between us. Just one, raw, terrible truth. And silence. So much silence.
One hiding under your bed. It's the one sitting at the dinner table with you. The one with your father's eyes and your mother's smile. Alex's story isn't about blood and violence. It's about the horror of the evil that hides in the most ordinary of shells. About the fact that sometimes the place we think is safest is the most dangerous place of all. It leaves us with a terrifying question. Do you truly know the people you love? Do you truly know the secrets hidden behind the closed doors of your own home? Thank you for joining Horror Stories Hub through the darkness in Ohio tonight. If this story has made you think, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next journey into the most frightening corners of America. And most importantly, let us know in the comments, which state's horrors do you want us to explore next? I'm your host. Have a safe night. If you can.